Otula Owol, the editor of Science Africa. And for me, this is one person I started reading his articles quite a while back in Nation, I think.
Nation Media also, I did an interview, and they wanted someone to help them cover certain conferences or issues that they say journalists would go and come back and say there was no story. And particularly during scientific presentations. Then they told me to do a story about environment in Nairobi. And that time I had a typewriter, and that was like a computer nowadays. So I brought them story within, they gave me 48 hours, I brought it within 24 hours. So they used that story. That meant they were going to give me a job. So that's how I ended up in the newsroom. A good journalist is one who has, first of all, deals with issues, particularly in part of the world, that are relevant, and they don't forget that they are the people's watchdog. They are the eyes of the people. They are very, particularly in our part of the world, they are the voice of the people who are unheard, the people who are unseen. It's a privilege when you are, for example, a health journalist, because if you're a good and fair one, people would come and tell you things they don't even tell the doctors. They would even tell you how the doctors treated them, what the nurses were gossiping on them. They would tell you how the family treat them. But that's if they follow what you write and how you approach the issues. So I had a lot of those who thought of, in fact, talking to me and calling me and telling me their stories. But again, you could not mention their names. They just want to talk to you and relate. If you have a way of putting it, then you do. The newsrooms were, I would say, they were more scared than anybody, because it was like something they didn't understand. It was something not to be talked about. If you said it is in your country, it's like you are unpatriotic. They didn't want journalists to deal with issues of AIDS, because if you said AIDS is here, you are scaring away tourists. You are stereotyping and stigmatizing your country. You are stigmatizing individuals, communities. So these are all stereotypes that came with HIV, and it was a disease that was difficult to cover. There were very few journalists who were keen on dealing with AIDS, because those days doctors talked in hard scientific terms, and they didn't want you around when they were discussing AIDS, because they would show PowerPoints, pictures they took of patients who are suffering from AIDS and some of the opportunistic infection they would have, oral thrush, what all these pictures which, so they would not want you there and all these kind of things. But fortunately and unfortunately, I used to attend them, because initially they didn't want me. But when they found I had a strong interest and was doing it credibly and questioning so many things, particularly when they found I would do articles questioning the struggle for money between Gallo and Luc Montagnier, and the laboratories sharing of the patents and the theories of where this thing evolved from. And so that made a lot of them comfortable with me. But I would also spend that time to remind people that you have to protect yourself, use a condom, stick to your mutually faithful partner, or abstain. I would always try to end most of my articles with that. It was an ongoing story from very many angles. The angle of it has the chances to exterminate people, and the chances that children can also come with infection when they are born. It had lots of implications for survival and even socioeconomic development, because if it is a disease that if you want cripples people, you don't work for a long period, and that kind of, the implications were actually serious also. The uncertainty of the HIV on very many angles. Some people would say it's not it. They didn't even know which kind of, they had to classify it, they had to agree now on one name. And so the frustration as a journalist, because journalists also, science journalism is about dealing with proven knowledge. So whenever I went to discover this, I always find everything said was not proven. The tests, the emerging cures, the sources of this virus, nothing seemed to have been proven. There's a lot of stories. The media still has a lot of work to do, particularly now we are going county level. How much is county going to allocate for health? And how much will be for HIV? And the issues are not as complicated as they used to make them. Now they look at very many aspects. Where it is going, the tests are more direct, people are more open. They do. They do. And okay, and nowadays I would say there are a lot of incentives for the media also to write on health. Nowadays, okay, so you had a lot of travels and things like that, but you are always like dealing with people who didn't appreciate having a journalist cover the issues of health. They didn't understand why you are there, because they are supposed to publish in journals. So, but that has changed because doctors are willing, medical community are willing to give information. They may get one or two things may not be correct, but it's totally different from when we were. Because newsrooms, journalists used to be taken as stupid people. People whom you just fill them up with a story to do, they take your notes, they quote you, they go do your story, you give them beer. They were not like people who go back and read and say, now what is this? And do a bit of research and background. So journalists were supposed to deal, not just in Kenya, worldwide. Journalists evolved as easy things. Health was a little bit too hard, but that has changed. Because journalists deal with a lot of knowledge from different angles, put it in the public domain. They're the people's eyes. They looked into scientists' labs, how they handle diseases. So you have found they have done well. They have done well. They have grasped health issues, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. Back in Nigeria, there was a case of a famous medical person, Abalaka. There was the case of him also claiming he had a cure. Until actually it is the media who also kind of exposed him by following up those who are taking up those drugs and found out that they were not working. There's a lot of stories I have to say I left out because maybe it was not their time. And I don't know. Okay, journalists can just talk, but you also have to be credible, and you also have to be, fair and balanced in the sense that you would write that story, but you would be kind of mechanical, because this one it tells you in confidence. Okay, in confidence, you maybe use it generally how these things can be frustrating to doctors, and they would say, but also as a journalist, you tell them you have not communicated enough. Journalists have held policy worldwide. They have made researchers put them on their toes, policy makers to allocate money. They have increased awareness, and it has also improved the level of understanding of health issues as a whole, diseases. It has brought a lot of, enlightenment on disease issues. Everybody, from the presidents of the world to the queens to the kings, are interested in health issues. Let them not cheat you. So health journalists, and AIDS has been at the center of health journalism for a long time, because it's linked to sex, it is linked to other diseases, it is linked to stigma, it is linked to psychology, every other thing. So I would still say health journalism should improve. Improve does not mean it is poor, but we want more interested in, should be more targeting, should have more impact on policy, and so that more funds are allocated, should hold researchers accountable, should hold the medical community accountable, should also enlighten individuals, especially in the era of FM stations, community radio stations, in the era of mobile, you can send a message. There is no excuse why the public cannot be enlightened.